Hello, friends. If you are here with me today, get ready for some scary stories because that is what we're here for. It's Spooktober, and I'm going to be reading some stories from More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, collected by Alvin Schwartz. Without further ado, here is the first story. It's called Rings on Her Fingers. Daisy Clark had been in a coma for more than a month when the doctor said that she had finally died. She was buried on a cool summer day in a small cemetery about a mile from her house. May she always rest in such peace, her husband said. But she didn't. Late that night, a grave robber with a shovel and a lantern began to dig her up. Since the ground was so soft, he quickly reached the coffin and got it open. His hunch was right. Daisy had been buried wearing her two valuable rings, a wedding ring with a diamond in it, and a ring with a ruby that glowed as if it were alive. The thief got down on his knees and reached into the coffin to get the rings, but they were stuck fast on her fingers. So he decided that the only way to get them off was to cut off her fingers with a knife. But when he cut into the finger with the wedding ring, it began to bleed, and Daisy Clark began to stir. Suddenly, she sat up. Terrified, the thief scrambled to his feet. He accidentally kicked over the lantern, and the light went out. He could hear Daisy climb out of the grave. As she moved past him in the dark, he stood there, frozen with fear, clutching the knife in his hand. When Daisy saw him, she pulled her shroud around her and asked, "Who are you?" When the grave robber heard this corpse speak, he ran. Daisy shrugged her shoulders and walked on, and never once looked back. But in his fear and confusion, the thief fled in the wrong direction. He pitched headlong into her grave, fell on the knife, and stabbed himself. While Daisy walked home, the thief bled to death. The Drum. Once there were two sisters. Dolores was 7 and Sandra was 5. They lived in a small house in the country with their mother and their baby brother, Arthur. Their father was a seaman and was away on a long voyage. One day, Dolores and Sandra were running across a field near their house when they met a gypsy girl playing a drum. Her family was camping in the field for a few days. As the girl played, a little mechanical man and woman came out of the drum and danced. Dolores and Sandra had never seen such a drum, and they begged the girl to give it to them. She looked at them and laughed. "I will give it to you," she said, "but only if you are really bad. Come back tomorrow and tell me how bad you were, and we'll see." As soon as the two sisters got home, they started shouting, which was against the rules in their house. Then they wrote all over the walls with their crayons. At supper, they spilled their food, and when it was time for bed, they wouldn't go. They did everything they could think of to upset their mother. They were really bad. Early the next morning, they hurried off to find the girl. "We were really bad yesterday," they told her, "so please give us the drum." But when they told her what they'd done, the girl only laughed. "Oh, you must be much worse than that if I'm going to give you this drum," she said. As soon as Dolores and Sandra got home, they pulled up all the flowers in the garden. They let the pig out and chased it away. They tore their clothes. They sloshed in the mud. They were a lot worse than the day before. "If you don't stop," said their mother, "I'll go away and I'll take Arthur with me." and you'll get a new mother with glass eyes and a wooden tail." That scared Dolores and Sandra. They loved their mother and they loved Arthur. They could not imagine being without them, and they began to cry. "I don't want to leave you," their mother said, "but unless you change your behavior, I will have to leave you." "We'll be good," the girls promised. Yet, they didn't really believe their mother would go away. "She's just trying to scare us," said Dolores. "We'll get the drum tomorrow," said Sandra, "and then we'll be good again." Early the next morning, they rushed off to find the girl again. When they found her, she was playing the drum, and the little man and the woman were dancing. They told the girl how they'd been bad the day before. "That must have been bad enough to get the drum," they said. "Oh no," said the girl, "you must be much, much worse than that." "It's only for one more day," Dolores told Sandra. "Then we'll have the drum." "I hope you're right," said Sandra. As soon as they got home, they beat the dog with a stick. They broke all the dishes. They tore their clothes to pieces. They spanked the baby brother, Arthur. Their mother began to cry. "You are not keeping your promise," she said. "We'll be good, we promise," said Dolores and Sandra. "I can't wait much longer. Please try," said their mother. Early the next morning, before their mother was awake, Dolores and Sandra ran to see the girl. They told her all about the bad things they'd done the day before. "We were horrid," said Sandra. "We were worse than we've ever been," said Dolores. "So can we have the drum now, please?" "No," said the girl. "I never meant to give it to you. It was just a game we were playing." "I thought you knew that." Dolores and Sandra began to cry. They rushed home as quickly as they could, but their mother and Arthur were gone. "They're out shopping," Dolores said. "They'll be back soon." But they were not back when lunch came. Dolores and Sandra felt lonely and scared. They wandered through the fields the rest of the day. "Maybe they'll be home when we get back," they said. When they got home, they saw through the window that the lamps were lit and that there was a fire in the fireplace. But they didn't see their mother and Arthur. Instead, they saw their new mother, her glass eyes glistening and her wooden tail thumping on the floor. The window. Margaret and her brothers, Paul and David, shared a small house on top of a hill just outside a village. It was so warm one summer's night that Margaret couldn't sleep. She sat up in bed in the darkness of her room, watching the moon move across the sky. Suddenly, something caught her eye. She saw two small yellow-green lights moving through the woods near the graveyard at the bottom of the hill. They looked like the eyes of an animal, but she couldn't make out what kind of creature it was. Soon the creature left the woods and moved up the hill towards the house. For a few minutes, Margaret lost sight of it. Then she saw it coming across the lawn towards her window. It looked something like a man, and yet it didn't. Margaret was terrified. She wanted to run away from her room, but the door was next to her window. She was afraid the creature would see her and break in before she could escape. When the creature turned and moved in another direction, Margaret rushed to the door. But before she could open it, the creature was back. Margaret found herself staring through the window at a shrunken face like a mummy. Its yellow-green eyes gleamed like a cat's eyes. She wanted to scream, but she was so frightened that she couldn't make a sound. The creature broke the window glass, unlocked the window, and crawled itself inside. Margaret tried to flee, but the creature caught her. It twisted its long, bony fingers into her hair, pulled back her head, and sank its teeth into her throat. Margaret screamed and fainted. When her brothers heard her piercing scream, they rushed into her room. But by the time they got the door unlocked, The creature had fled, and Margaret lay on the floor, bleeding and unconscious. While Paul tried to stop the bleeding, David chased the creature down the hill towards the graveyard, but soon he lost sight of it. The police thought it was the work of an escaped lunatic who believed that he was a vampire. When Margaret recovered, her brothers wanted to move to a safer place where it would be harder to break in, but Margaret refused. The creature would never come back. She was sure of that, but just in case, Paul and David began to keep loaded pistols in their rooms. 1 month later, Margaret was awakened by a scratching sound at the window. When she opened her eyes, there was the same shrunken face staring back at her. That night, her brothers heard her cries in time. They chased the creature down the hill, and David shot it in the leg. But the creature managed to scramble over the graveyard wall and disappear into the old burial vault. The next day, Margaret and her brothers watched as the pastor of the church opened the burial vault. Inside was a horrifying scene. Broken coffins, bones, and rotting flesh were scattered all over the floor. Only one coffin had not been disturbed. When the pastor opened it, there lay the creature with the shrunken face that had attacked Margaret. The telltale bullet was in its leg. They did the only thing they knew to rid themselves of a vampire. The pastor built a roaring fire outside the vault and fed the shrunken body to the flames. They watched the body burn until nothing remained but ashes. If you were brave enough to get through these spooky stories, tune in next time, because I'll be back with more scary stories. Have a spooky autumn and a scary October, everyone.